I just wanted to give Vicky some thanks for adding extra memos to the abstracts. That's really helpful. I've noticed that there's more information, so that's really helping me. And also thank you for resending the budget in an email just to make sure everyone had it.
Sure.
Hope it doesn't feel like you're spoon feeding us, but I appreciated it today.
Well, for some reason, it's just not syncing correctly. So it's easier this way to make sure you have it.
Oh, okay, great.
I think there's too much in that shared drive to sync now. I keep getting those error notification emails.
What should we do about that then?
I'll clean it out. I haven't gotten the error.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it too, Tammy.
Okay.
Would it be helpful if I get that email, I can just forward it on to you, maybe? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, going forward, because for some reason I don't get it, and I don't know if it's because I'm the owner or.
I think
I
because
don't get
you're.
an email, just get a notice. Hey, warning, buy space.
Yeah. If you guys could forward that to me in the future, and then we won't run into that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, Keith has joined us, so I will call to order this March regular monthly meeting of the Village of Shrewsbury Board of Trustees. Everyone is present. We have a relatively full agenda that we are going to labor through. Are there any changes to the agenda? Anything that anyone needs to add or delete? We will have need of a brief executive session at the end to discuss police personnel. Anything else? Going once?
The public hearing for the budget.
Right. Thank you, Vicky.
I'm sorry, I thought that was on the agenda.
No, the what's on the agenda is the public hearing for the tax override local law.
Okay.
We actually have to announce or introduce or set the date and time of our public hearing on the budget, which is always in April, but we have to formally state that. Seeing no one, let's see. Seeing no one from the public other than elected reps, we can move past item number 3 on the agenda and move right to our reps. Anne or Mary, whichever one of you would like to go first, please do.
I can go first since I don't see Mary there right this second. The biggest thing is trying to get folks vaccinated and trying to get it as organized as we can as information and everything changes. And I wanted to put a big shout out and thanks to Mayor Warden Hart for helping get almost every single person vaccinated at Juniper Manor. So that was a concerted effort. And so that really feels good because I've been worried about those folks, as I'm sure you have been, Warden, and a lot of other people. So that is something to check off our list. And the county is also working with other apartment complexes that have seniors. Also on our list are low-income apartment complexes. And one of the biggest things that we're asking everybody to do is, if you're currently eligible for the vaccine, is to sign up for our registry. So it's the vaccination registry, and that's on our website at the health department. If someone has trouble doing that electronically, they can call 211 during regular business hours. I think it's like 8 to 5. You can call up 211 and they will help sign you up, and then you will get a phone call. And then the next thing that we're running into too is that then we notify people if they're eligible to get the vaccine at the mall, and we're not hearing back from the people with the number of notices we're putting out. So once you sign up for the registry, you still need to check like your email, for instance, maybe 3 times a day, because what's going to happen is we send out a notice to a group of people, and then we need you to sign up. If we don't hear back from you, we offer it to the next group, like a grouping of people, and we keep going. So we don't want anybody to miss it if they are eligible. This last week we got, I can't remember now, almost 3,000 vaccinations out. So that was really great. By Thursday, we had 350 appointments for Friday for seniors that we were having trouble filling. So it took till noon on Friday to get those all filled. And so we really, again, we want people to just keep track of their emails and everything. This week we had less vaccines or vaccinations come. We have 1,170 doses that came this week, so it's a little bit lower. And of those, 700 are for phase 1B essential workers and 470 are for individuals with comorbidities. And I might have said this before, we get allotments from the state. So last week we got an allotment that was specifically for seniors 65 and over. So we are not in control of that when we get our certain allotments. So, and those are all taken. They let people know about that by emails and other ways. And so those are all taken for this week. And we are starting to work on our budget, which I know you guys are too, and that will take quite a while. And we are hoping to get money from the federal government, and with the new legislation that's coming through. So we're hoping also that small municipalities might get something. I don't know if you've gotten notified that you might also get something from the it's not the CARES Act, but anyway, from the new assistance that might come out. And those are those are the main things for COVID. The other biggest thing that we're working on is the reimagining law enforcement, reimagining public safety, I should say. And most of the feedback that we've been getting from people with the draft statement that's out now, the draft plan, is more about what the city of Ithaca might be doing according to this plan. And that is in regards to reorganizing their public safety department and changing it to more people that can go out for issues that aren't police officers, not armed people, but just that's going to be, that's tentatively called the community solutions workers. So most of the feedback we've been getting is from law enforcement that they don't like that plan, but that is really up to the city, even though it's a joint county and city plan. So we are waiting on to hear back from the city if they still want to have it be included like that, or if they're going to make any changes in that. So those are the two biggest things we've been working on lately.
Thank you, Ann. Any questions or comments for Ann? I will just echo what Ann said about the effort at Juniper Manor. It was an interesting process. I do want to thank Elin Dowd from our executive director of the Health Consortium. She put me in touch with the gentleman who's managing the vaccine distribution for the entire Kinney's network. And he agreed to do an on-site clinic, but couldn't give me a date. And as fate would have it, 2 weeks later, the county was able to schedule to take a number of residents up to the mall site if they wanted to sign up. So when I relayed that information to, his name is John, when I relayed that information to John, he said, well, if there's only a handful of people left that aren't willing to get on the bus, then we'll come down and do it tomorrow. So between a combination of the two, we were able to get everyone to the health department site, and then the 10 people that for a variety of reasons can't travel outside of the facility, we had a local pharmacist that works for Kinney come and give them their vaccines in their apartment rooms. So that was great for them. So thank you, Ann, for all of your efforts on that front.
You're welcome. There was just one more thing I thought of. For the registry, for the vaccination registry through the county, you can also help somebody register or register yourselves if you are homebound. So it's not included in anything from the state, but we want to get those. We want to know who those people are, so that, because we are working on trying to figure out how to get out to them, whether it's us or the pharmacies, But we want to make sure those people are identified as much as possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mary Bouchard from the town.
Yeah, hi. I only have a couple of things, couple of brief things. One of the things that I thought would probably be of interest to the village was that, the town has had a electric vehicle charging station for a few years now that was obtained under a grant. And it was free for a while, and we're going to start charging people who use the charging station. And we did our research and determined that we want to charge $1 an hour. And so we passed that at the last meeting. And then since then, Nancy and I were discussing the possibility of maybe having a higher charge after 3 hours to discourage people from just pulling in there and leaving their car there all day so that nobody else can use it. So the possibility was $1.50 per hour after 3 hours at $1 an hour. And that seems to be kind of the going rate. We just really want to cover our costs. Most of the cost is not actually in electricity, it's in the having the charging station there. And then the second thing is that the town has started up a tree advisory board, and in an effort to become a tree city through the Arbor Day Foundation. And one of the things that you're supposed to do is to have some sort of Arbor Day event. And I mentioned it to Peggy Hain because she's spearheading the tree planting by the fairgrounds. And she said that she was working with the village. I don't know I don't know who she's been in contact with, but I was hoping perhaps that we could combine the village and town Arbor Day celebration, maybe make it a bigger thing. So I don't know if anybody has anybody been in contact with Peggy or?
Yes. So Mary, if you want to put me in touch with the chair of your committee, I'd be happy to figure that out. This year, they've actually waived the requirement to do that celebration, but I think it would be worth getting in touch and maybe doing something anyway, or doing something next year. In any case, having the contact information. So that would be great. Okay.
Well, actually, I don't think that the actual advisory committee has been constituted yet. So, but I will make a note to have someone from that committee get in touch with you. I do believe that the Rotary Club is planning on planting those trees, although Peggy said she didn't know when they were coming in. So I don't know. I don't know about that. It may not fall around Arbor Day, but in any event, I will keep you posted. So you didn't have any firm plans for anything this year, right? No.
Karen Powers is on the village committee, and she works closely with Peggy and obviously that group. So she was sort of our liaison there, which is probably who Peggy is talking about.
Okay.
But no, we didn't have any firm plans.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's about all that I have. Any questions or anything?
Any questions or comments for Mary? Well, thank you, Mary.
Okay.
Item number 5 on our agenda is the public hearing for our first local law of 2021, the annual tax cap override. And the language has not changed from year to year, so I won't I won't read the entire thing. But just to summarize, this is a local law which provides the flexibility and the ability for this board to override the tax levy limitations established by General Municipal Law, Section 3C. So if we need to adopt a budget that includes a levy increase larger than what is allowed this year by state law, then we will be able to. So with that said, I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing on proposed local law 1 of 2021.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are in our public hearing for proposed local law 1 of 2021. I suppose the only people who might comment would be Mary or Ann. If either one of you has anything that you would like to say on this, we'd be certainly happy to have your input.
I'm good.
Sure, I'll just say something so you have at least some feedback, but I know it's really hard and you guys do a really good job of being fiscally responsible. So thank you for doing everything that you do. And if you have to go over it, I know it won't be a thing you take lightly. So thank you.
Thanks, Ann. And thank you, Mary. And we'll give it 30 seconds to see if anyone else, any members of the public show up. Don't know if I'll make it all 30 seconds. We'll see. Well, seeing no one else from the public is present, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on proposed local law 1 of 2021.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now out of our public hearing on proposed local law 1 of 2021. And so I would entertain a motion to adopt proposed local law 1 of 2021, the override of tax levy limitations.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comment or discussion from the board? Hearing none, then all in favor of adopting local law 1 of 2021 as proposed, please say aye.
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 And no one is opposed, and so it passes. Which brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. We have three sets of meeting minutes. We have the village disaster plan, which I shared last month. It's basically a slight revision of our reopening plan. The New York State is requiring the municipalities adopt some type of a plan in the event of some future health emergency. So taking our reopening plan and adopting it for the opposite of reopening, for the need to shut things down in the event of a future health emergency. That is in the consent agenda. It's not a local law, it's a policy resolution. And then we also have our abstract of claims for the month, which I will just read through very quickly here. General fund abstract totaling $328,738.16. Scrolling, EMS billing abstract in the amount of $37,636.06. The water fund abstract in the amount of $49,076.02. And the sewer fund abstract in the amount of $33,787.34. Rounds out the consent agenda. So I would entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as provided?
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. That brings us to item number 7 on the agenda, which is reports from board members. And I'll kick it off with something that is actually overdue by several months. And I'll just blame COVID for the oversight. Thank you, Cami, for pointing it out. We hired Chief Nelson back in August of 2018 on a provisional basis, as there was the need for him to take and pass the New York State Police Chief A examination, which he did last year sometime. So as I say, it was an oversight that I will happily blame on the pandemic and not take responsibility for that oversight. So now that he has passed that test, he no longer needs to be a provisional police chief. We can appoint him to the position permanently, which is something of a formality, but something that we should definitely do anyway. So I would entertain a motion that we make permanent the appointment of Bruce J. Nelson as the Chief of Police of the Village of Trumansburg Police Department.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this?
Thank you, Tammy.
Hearing no other discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Tammy, if you'll just email county personnel and let them know that that was adopted tonight. I'm going to skip around the next couple of items, just changing the order slightly. A deer management update is very brief. March is our last month of the deer management program licensing. It ends on March 31st. As of the end of February, the participants had taken 61 deer so far. And with the cold weather in the last couple of weeks, they are still out and active. So that is up. I don't have last year's numbers in front of me, but that is up a fair bit from the last couple of years. So that is a good thing from the perspective of the effectiveness of the program. We do need to formally set the date for the public hearing for the budget, which we will set as Monday, April the 12th at 7 p.m. Thank you, Vicki, for reminding me of that. We should, I think, since it is March, Ides of March or next week, we should be thinking about a State of the Village date. So we had talked about tentatively moving it to May. If we still have gathering requirements, restrictions, concerns, it looks like the outside gathering numbers are rather large now, 250 people. We can do indoor gatherings for certain public meetings and business meetings of up to 50. So that's still, that does require social distancing currently. So by May, I don't know what that will look like, but we certainly don't want to wait around for rules to be adjusted to decide when and where to have State of the Village. So I think that the idea we kicked around a couple of months ago of holding it at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning in May. There is a Wi-Fi drop there, so if we need to simulcast and or have a Zoom link for the meeting for anyone who's not comfortable attending, we can certainly accommodate that. The fact that it's outside means that we've never had 250 people show up. So we're talking about, if we were to get the most we've ever had come to a State of the Village, we'd be talking about 85 or 90. So there would be plenty of room for that many people to effectively distance if we still have those guidelines and requirements to adhere to and contend with. The only thing we have to do is dodge weather, but that's kind of like every Saturday in upstate New York. So as long as we're well into May, I think that would be a fair time, unless anyone on the board thinks that we should push it off even further or wait for some other metric to change for us to make that decision. So I'll just open it up quickly to comments, thoughts, May is an interesting month. We have certainly we have Mother's Day, we have Memorial Day. We may, if we can this year, have. I don't know if Tammy's put any thought into whether we would do a community yard sale day. So it could be a busy month, but I don't want to completely skip the state of the village because I think that I think a lot of folks get a lot out of the annual, what has the village been up to over the last year and what are we looking forward to for the next kind of update.
I'll
Thoughts,
say,
comments?
I think it still sounds like a great idea. To your point, we're already seeing it loosening outside. We're planning on holding it outside. I think we'll be able to be comfortable and safe with people even as things stand, and knock on wood, things are improving even further by then. Just looking at the dates, I think probably not Memorial Day weekend or Mother's Day weekend, but that leaves the two kind of middle weekends. I'd probably lean towards the 22nd personally, just to keep it towards the end of May, but either one could probably work. The 15th would work just as well, I suppose.
And when would the yard sale be, Tammy? If we did.
It actually would have been the 22nd.
Is that necessarily a bad idea? Is it maybe okay if it were the same day? It's like stuff's happening, right?
Yeah, the only thing I would have to change on our end is not renting out the farmer's market to people, right?
Oh, that
to
was a thing?
use
I didn't
it.
realize that. Okay.
And the other question I would have about using the farmer's market is how would we set up chairs and accommodate,
ADA compliant.
well, just accommodating people. Especially in May, the farmer's market tends to be kind of swampy, but I'm just thinking, how do we provide seating for everyone there?
I think we could either bring down chairs from the fire department, or we could, where the band sets up, the board could sit, and we could encourage people to bring their own favorite lawn chair, make it more of a concert feel.
Okay.
That would be another option. I have no problem asking, a couple of the more helpful folks from the fire company to drag down chairs if we needed to, but I also think that the concert at the park version of State of the Village could also work.
Speaking of that, are you concerned about PA at all?
No.
Do we
No,
have PA?
Yes.
And the grandstand is wired?
There's
The bandstand is
electricity.
wired?
There's
Okay.
electricity.
Yeah, there's electricity there, and I think we would want to bring down the speakers from the firehouse
Mhm.
and have microphones for everybody except Keith.
Right.
And that way people could hear what we have to say.
And my recollection is that this is often in the morning, is it not? So
Yeah,
I
9
feel like even if this is, unless it makes it too much for the village office, even if it were yard sale day, they kind of great. If chicken barbecue, State of the Village, yard sale day, if that happened.
Yeah, I have no qualms about it. Sure to be fine. As long as I have a place to put people, that would be my only concern.
And so Tammy, we rented out booths of the farmers market for people so that could still happen even. Not that they would want to be vending during our thing, but we wouldn't be occupying booths. People could be setting up.
Yeah, we couldn't be there at the same time, no.
No, not with the sale happening, but
Right.
it would be like, okay, this space is available to you starting at whatever for sales.
Yeah, they're usually run from 8 to 2, so I don't,
Okay.
yeah, I think we would probably take a majority of the chunk of that day, but
Oh, okay.
again, even if we have to put plywood down for chairs, it's fine, I just need a plan, that's all. Everything's doable with a plan.
Okay, so then we'll tentatively say Saturday, May 22nd at 9 a.m. Does that sound right?
I should
At
bring
the
your
farm.
yard sale down to the state of the village. That's just one big party.
There you go.
Walk around hawking your wares during the.
As long
That's
as the
why you don't
farmer's
get 'em.
market's not active, I don't know about putting residents in arm's reach of produce while we're giving our political updates.
More concerned about
Especially
the
because it's all
craft
hard,
beer
nasty
vendor.
root vegetables at that time. And also please remind me, I've attended them, but I don't pay as much attention. How long does it run? I'm thinking about chicken barbecue.
9 to
3
noon.
hours? 9 to noon. Perfect.
9 to noon. So if we do happen to be able to have a chicken barbecue set up in the DPW parking lot there, we'll have to kind of finagle parking a little bit, although the pull off across the street is not yet rededicated. So folks can park there. They can park in the DPW lot as long as we have a place for whoever does the barbecue, if that does happen.
Does that work, or would it be better to have? Is that okay? It's not too cramped, right? There's plenty of space.
There's plenty of space.
I think there should be.
So do you want me to start working on postcards or?
Yes. Just come up with a rough design and we will edit from there.
Something to consider for that is if we want to include anything about the comp plan on there or do as a separate mailer, because at some point we should send that out when we're more of the formal public comment.
Well, part of what we need to, the part B to this is what topics do we want to discuss? We can provide updates, but is there anything that immediately comes to mind? Comp plan is a big one.
Footbridge.
Yeah, footbridge. Good.
Sewer rate increases.
Yeah, we'll certainly do a budget overview.
Will you talk about that good police workshopping that happened? Or no?
We could certainly discuss it. I mean, we have to adopt it and send it to the state by April 1st, so it would be a look back, but we could do that.
Well, we do have the plan to keep the dialogue going in some sort of committee group form. So we'll be able to talk to that as well.
Right.
There's also a couple of things that are in the air right now that might have moved more by the time we get there. And I know we've talked about the grassroots conversation that may land in front of this board. So we're holding some time for potential topics that might land between now and then.
Right. We won't need to send out topic postcards until the end of April anyway. So keep that in mind if anything seems pressing that we will want to cover. Okay. Back to the agenda items. State of the village, dear. The last thing is, and the reason I moved it around is Keith and I had talked earlier a little bit about this. As everyone, I hope, as everyone knows, well, certainly everyone in this room knows. I'm not sure if anyone's watching on YouTube or not. The village released its police reform informational packet. What's that, a week ago now? And it's the culmination of a lot of work by a lot of folks. I want to thank Keith. I want to thank Chief Nelson. I want to thank all of the members of what has become, we're referring to it as a listening group. There were attendees at the various public meetings who have felt that they wanted to remain engaged in conversation about policing in general and our village police department in particular. So it is the culmination of a lot of work and a lot of feedback. But I moved it to the end of my section here because I did want to, as you all know, we are having a not a public hearing, but we'll call it one, a public hearing, public meeting next week on the 18th to solicit and receive comments from members of the public about it. And then we, as a board, have a meeting on the 29th to hopefully adopt whatever the, at that point, final version is after any edits made based on public input. But I wanted to give Jessica, Ben, and Ben a chance now to, if you have any initial input, comments, or questions about it, because I'd like to reserve the 18th for kind of public at large commentary. And then between now and then the 29th, certainly there, you all are free to email any comments you have, but if there's anything that you wanted to discuss or questions of a question and answer nature, this is probably going to be one of the only chances, except for the 18th, of course. So Jessica, Ben, and Ben, if you had any comments or thoughts, please take the opportunity, take the time.
I can start with reiterating a couple points. I know I'd responded to the email, but one thing that I think I'd like to see is I really appreciate the breakout of calls per month in the report there for the year. The one thing I think it could benefit from is it breaks down the individual criminal charges or criminal investigations and non-criminal investigations, but it wasn't clear like what's the ratio between the two. So I think that might be a nice thing to add in there. And then the other thing I'd brought up was mentioning our use of body cameras, because I know I'm assuming folks would be interested in knowing about that. I know we've been revisiting that and spending some money to get back up to speed on that. So that would be a good thing to point out. But otherwise, I appreciated the work. I was very impressed to see the kind of topics that were covered in the listening sessions. They definitely hit all the kind of notes that I was interested in seeing. So I feel like it did a good job of covering what I was looking for to have as part of the conversation.
Good. Yeah, those are on my list of edits to add some more detail to the call breakdown. Probably have to include Keith, you'll have to find a spot in there that makes sense to include a blurb about the body cam information that we've utilized body worn cameras for nearly a decade, but they've been offline for the last couple of years because the old ones were past their life expectancy.
Yeah, and thanks for that feedback, Ben. And I think it actually strengthens talking about that strengthens the proposal a bit, because the cameras that we are invested in, come with the software package that actually, not that we would expect this, but it makes it harder to essentially, I think, tamper with footage or anything like that, because it's more of a direct upload to the DA, as I understand it. We can talk a little bit more about that when I write it up. But yeah, and then actually with regards to the stats, I think I was talking with Chief after further review. I think I'm going to rework those numbers a bit before the public hearing, because I think that call volume is actually lower than it really is. I think we were actually over 3,000. So Chief brought that up, and so I got to rework those numbers a bit.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned it, looks like that graph might have stopped in October, so maybe it wasn't the full 12 months or something.
Yeah, so I'm going to run those numbers again before our public hearing, and I can include the percentages of the volume on the two different types of call.
I'll speak. So I think that it's a tremendous presentation, and I like that I feel like there's the voice of a human behind it. It's approachable that way in tone. And I echoed a comment that my colleagues made about being an executive comment instead of an executive summary, and barring any sort of other notions of syntax or grammar that I will just write in my red pen over the other version. I'm wondering if and so I'm also hesitant to say this is really representative of the work that you all did as a workshop. So this might not be relevant in the presentation, but there's sort of a lack of any detail of the sensitivity training that officers have. And I'm wondering if that might be worth highlighting. Like, oh, by the way, this is part of what it means to be, like, we say that you're going to be sensitive, but I don't know. But again, if that's not, it doesn't have a place in this presentation. But I think it reinforces, right?
Yeah, I actually right at the last second, as I was submitting this draft, realized that I did kind of have a training slide sketched out, and it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. But I think because that is something that was asked a lot about residents and members of the public that attended our meetings. And the truth of it is, what we discussed was most of the training is done at their full-time, the departments that the officers are full-time at. But we do have a little bit of money in our budget for training, so we can.
Yeah, sure. And even that, just to say, yeah, we don't have to conduct that because in order to be on this our force, they've already received this and the state mandates or whatever. I think that it's.
No, you're right. And
encouraging
I think it is important. Yeah, I'll be sure to get that in.
Yeah, and I think, Keith, to that point, I would frame the slide in the context of the kinds of training that our officers have undertaken. So regardless of whether that training came through this police department or the fact that we do utilize part-timers, in part because they bring with them skill sets and training that they have through their primary department, I think that would be helpful. One of the conversations that I'm having right now with other municipal departments in the county is that there's a very, and it's really nobody's fault, and maybe it's our fault. There's really a very low level of understanding of the sheer number of hours and the millions of dollars spent on training in police departments in this county. And we can chalk it up to our county wanting to do things better than the next county, right, Ann? Or just the way law enforcement operates in New York State versus other states and that kind of thing. So I think that would be very helpful to see insight to some type of even if it's just a list. Train the type of training, and I can say, or Joe can say, someone's taken a class in how to de-escalate tense situations with a veteran with PTSS. But what does that really mean? Was that a 2-hour class or was it a 2-week class? That I think would be helpful for people to be able to see. Ben Carver?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. I'm a little hesitant to jump in because my feelings are sort of conflicted. I guess everyone's feelings on police departments are sort of conflicted, right? But it's, one of the key recommendations here, I think, is to hire a second full-time officer, which for me is, it feels like more than we need on the one hand. On the other hand, I think having full-time officers is essential for constructing what is positive about a police force, which is like a really community embracing culture and that kind of thing. So I'm quite conflicted. I don't really have a firm argument to make or anything. I just wanted to express that conflict publicly. I think, it is worth pointing out that right now, if we eliminated that and they needed that second full-time officer, our budget would basically be flat from last year to this one. But it's something to consider. I think maybe at least deferring that. That said, I think for me, the big takeaway about this is the process. And I just, big thanks to you guys for putting it together and for bringing people together and to everyone who came out. I think to me, the biggest thing is really just community engagement. So I think you've done really well so far on that, and hopefully people will come to the next.
Yeah, I think that kind of came out a little bit in our conversations with residents, Ben, the idea that if we want a police department that embodies a lot of these attributes that we're looking to build, you're more likely to get that with officers who are consistently spending more time in the village with residents. Unfortunately, that means you're actually probably investing more dollars in your police department, which in some respects goes against the feelings of what some people want to do. So I can appreciate that. And, I think, I'll let Roran can speak to this too, but I think in our discussions, Joe's not going to fill that position unless it's somebody that he knows for sure really fits what it's all about. And it's tricky because even though it is a little bit more expensive for us in terms of our overall budget, it's not like we can offer what Cuyahoga Heights can offer or something like that. So it has to be someone in the right stage of their career that is all in on our community policing philosophy. And so, I wouldn't imagine that's a position that gets filled quickly, if at all. But I would back up the notion that if we want to be all the things Joe wants to be, and this proposal kind of speaks to, I think we're better off. I mean, nothing against our part-time officers, but I think there's something nice about the full-timers in terms of the community presence that we had when Mackenzie and Ben were going at it.
Well, one thing I'm just thinking, we just talked about training and saying how we're somewhat dependent on the training that our part-time officers receive elsewhere. Not to say that that's not bad training, but we have just less, control over how we want to see that training happen. So that's just kind of one way of how that might work out.
Yeah, my only comment, Ben Carver, on the full-time is we actually did have a second full-time officer in last year's budget. We just never did hire them. So we actually are seeing a very slight decrease in the budget from 314 to 310. So we are holding the police budget line flat, even with the intention of following through, hopefully, and hiring that second full-time officer if we can find the right person. I will just say the one thing that although Keith was involved in the kind of the after committee that came out of this process. But one of the things that it was helpful for me going through all of this is I think sometimes I try not to forget, but I think it's still sometimes easy to forget that you don't know what you don't know. And for a lot of folks who don't know or have never had the opportunity to know, because who would, haven't had the opportunity to know how a police department operates, what the officers, what the perspective and purpose of a small community police department is. I think it was helpful for them, I hope, but it was also helpful for me to understand that it's not always people just there's a thirst for knowledge there. That we can say you can come to board meetings every month, but the 4 minutes of police information, if that's the only topic you're interested in, the 4 minutes of police information out of a 3-hour meeting is, that's not going to be worth it. So having a focus group like this going forward, I think will be helpful, just so that there can be a better understanding among the members in the community who are interested, better understanding for them of how this department operates. I would think that it would be, if there was the interest, and I sort of doubt that there is, but if there was the interest in any of our departments, if people really wanted to know why, how does a sewer plant operate? What is a water distribution system? If there was that level of interest, then I would think it might be worthwhile to try to find a way to facilitate that. But one department at a time, I suppose. Any other thoughts or comments while we're?
I do actually have a couple. Is there a way to include any testimonials of people who went through this process with you? Again, I think that it's really, to echo what Carver just said. I mean, this is a pretty significant community engagement piece that we've done. And it wasn't just a survey. I mean, people showed up and people had things to say and they were brave to ask questions. And I'm wondering if there's a way to include some testimonials that really carries the humanity all the way through, from the chief's voice at the beginning to participants at the end. And maybe the FAQ suffices to fill that need. I'm not sure. And okay, so now here's a question. Is there a benefit in having part-time people who are committed to the community but not of it, who might have a fresh approach? Or is there a benefit to having someone who doesn't know all the ins and outs exactly and comes with just a little bit more of, or could they be less biased, frankly? Is it kind of a good to have a mix? Provided they're not overworked and like fatigued from their reality of 2 jobs.
You're talking about, Jessica, are you talking about newer to the profession, newer to the community? Which angle are you referring to there?
No, I was just thinking like if one of the angles is having a second full-time person is more committed and involved in the community, is it actually a benefit to have someone who has a different perspective because they are part-time in the community, who maybe doesn't have any patterns or routines incorporated already? Like, could they actually be less biased? Potentially. We all are biased, but it was just an angle I hadn't really thought of until today.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think given the history of the department, we've always had only those people. So moving to 1 and now hopefully 2 full-timers, it actually swings the pendulum slightly the other way. We've always had part-timers who this is a side gig in the small village in the northwest corner of the county. It's not, they're I won't say they're outsiders. We certainly have had part-timers who know the community well. But I'm thinking about kind of the roster of part-timers that we have now. There's really only 1, 2 that would really, I would say, know the village very, very well. The others are familiar with it to a greater or lesser degree. 2 of our part-timers, I haven't looked at their schedule in a long time to see how many hours they actually work, but 2 of our part-time officers did grow up in the village, so they know it from that perspective. Everyone else is kind of some mix of more or less familiarity. To your first question, I really like the idea of the testimonial. I don't think it's appropriate for the submission to the state, because
Okay.
what the governor has asked for is fairly specific. It's supposed to be a report with a proposal for what are you going to do to make your department better. And obviously, if there are glaring deficiencies, you have more to do. If the deficiencies are kind of, as I hope everyone sees, is what I'm taking away from this report, is that deficiencies in our department are kind of around the margins in terms of communication, extra effort on certain fronts. But that's what the governor's mandate is to provide that testimonial of folks coming out of the committee. I think there's a lot of merit to that from the public facing standpoint of the village, given the amount of effort that went into it. But I'll leave it to Keith and the listening group to determine how much people want to raise their hand to give those testimonials.
One last thing I forgot. Sorry. Can you speak to on slide 15 under the department goals where it says work towards department accreditation? What does that mean?
So New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services, DCJS, has what they call an accreditation program, which basically means that your department meets their highest level, or maybe not highest level, but a very high level or a high standard for things like written policies and procedures that are less than, say, 18 months old and revised every year. If we just kind of go down the list, they would want to see things like, do we have a written use of force policy? Do we have a written body worn camera policy? Do we have a written, you name it, taser policy, a written pepper spray, all of these things that are both written and current. So pulling something off the shelf from 1987 isn't going to do it. So it's fairly stringent. It's a lot of, it's like the difference between, an accredited university and an online place where you can get the same information, but the diploma on the wall isn't going to carry the same weight, that kind of thing. I don't know that any of the police departments, in fact, I don't know of very many small municipal departments that are accredited, because it's a pretty big lift. But it is something that Chief and I have talked about. It's something that coming from the state police, he would like to see that type of formality throughout the department. And so one of the silver linings, there are a lot of silver linings, but one of the positives coming out of this mandate from the governor's office is I think it kind of kickstarts us on this path towards really making sure that, not only are all the I's dotted and T's crossed on the policies, but that they're relevant to our department, that there's a process to keep them current. So it's not another, decade before anyone takes a look at them, that kind of thing.
And so I think that's exactly why, that's very helpful. And that's exactly why it jumped out, Gordon, right? About what percentage of our workforce is in academia. And so that word accredited is a really big word. And so suddenly the way it's presented implies we're not accredited, which we're not, but maybe it deserves a footnote to explain what that actually means.
Yeah, as soon as you asked that question, Jessica, it occurred to me that as Roden laid it out, it occurred to me that there's just not going to be, not only the average person, pretty much everybody won't know what that means, the accreditation. So I think that's worthy of a breakdown on its own slide, probably.
And great to say, no, this is a really lofty goal. It's going to take effort to get there, and we're committed to getting there. Great, but don't freak out, everybody. We're not a lesser.
Well, and I think one of the things that I'm starting to envision as we talk is, this document is for the state, and Albany will understand what accreditation is. So I'm now beginning to think that, because we have this arbitrary April 1st deadline that we have to work with. So I'm beginning to think maybe it would be worth it to get this, obviously with comments, language, the training slide I think is a must, but then get this particular product over the next really 3 weeks ready for submission to the state, and then have it as a project for Keith and the working group to expand on it into some type of a community document that will be more community friendly when 6 months from now, someone who didn't take a look yesterday decides that they're finally going to get around to reading this thing. I think that might be a good approach. It'll certainly keep the conversation going, and keep this process going with community members. But I don't necessarily want to. I certainly don't want to get Keith or myself or Chief bogged down in getting this thing off to Albany, because that is really important, that deadline that we meet that. And then if we want to expand on it, it's kind of like it's kind of like a true executive summary versus the full document. If we want to treat this as an executive summary of the process, send it to Albany, and then we can expand on it for our own use, then I'm all for it.
That makes total sense. And if I can be supportive in the expansion process, let me know.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it ties into some of our conversation of maybe there's a piece to be brought out for the state of the village, if that's an approachable time horizon. But that would make more sense as that's kind of focused at the community and having the community really understand the document beyond just the pieces we need for the state. And I do hope, because listening to all these different things, my concern is that the conversation, even in the county, will be kind of overshadowed by the conversation with Ithaca and the county and what's going on there. It's a very different conversation. So I think, at least internally, I hope people recognize how the context is quite different here, with a small municipality and a small force with one full-time officer and a chief and so forth. And I think continuing to clarify those pieces when we're talking about having this conversation more inside of the community rather than towards Albany, I think would all make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think there's room, Keith, as you're thinking through this, for what slides to include. There are conversations on which will be starting soon, hopefully, among the other. So there are 4 village police departments in Tompkins County. There are going to be some conversations between the 4 of us and possibly the county itself on kind of logistical support for worst case scenario type events. How do we disaster plan? how do we do some of those things, not knowing where the city of Ithaca is going to go with their decision making, but hey, we're all part-time planners, and some of us are full-time planners by profession. You have to plan for the worst, and if the logistical support for some of the things that we see regularly, and I'm talking about threats on schools, bomb threats at corporate headquarters in Ithaca, barricaded subjects with small children present. That there were 3 of the last thing I just mentioned. There were 3 of those in the last 6 months of 2020. I mean, these things happen. So if the city of Ithaca is going to divorce themselves from traditional law enforcement, and part of that is support for crisis negotiation teams and things like that, then there's a broader conversation to be had about how do the rest of us prepare for those kinds of things. So that would certainly be an expansion on everything that's in this draft, which we can flesh out even further, and it can be a forever conversation as far as I'm concerned with anyone from the community who wants to engage in it.
And as we see more things, or I don't know, as we see the role of the county maybe changing or evolving, I know we mentioned this in the document, but I'm very interested in anything the county does around mental health services and homelessness services and that kind of thing, and being able to hopefully tie in at a village level with anything that goes on there as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. Anything more on this?
Jessica, thank you for recognizing the tone. All the other examples of reports I saw were very static and looked like something you get out of an insurance company's boardroom or something. Did not feel very friendly. So
Come on, actuaries are actually really fun.
yeah,
Taking swipes at Roden now.
Yeah. I do apologize. I think I might have understood the audience was directly Albany. So, but thank you for entertaining all the things I brought up.
Yeah, I mean, the audience for this product is Albany, but what we've seen, I mean, we're fortunate to live in the community we do, right? So, I mean, if the input had been completely different or non-existent, which would probably have been worse, then the product might look different. But we have to produce something for His Honor the Governor, and then we can get back to the business of what's appropriate for our community members and what they want to see. Just as an aside, this is the kind of conversation with this group, Keith. I think it was probably, and Ben Carver may remember, I'm not sure. It was a ways back. I don't remember if it was 2012, maybe. There was a meeting, a fairly well-attended village meeting, and there was, for some reason, some desire on the part of 2 or 3 people in the room to see details of police calls and police, see the granular level information. And then we kicked it around a little bit, and my question basically back to the room was, do you really want to know, the details of that call last night? And the consensus in the room was, well, when you come to think about it, no, not really. And so I think having that conversation is important, and every few years the topic rears its head because there are folks who are paying attention to that particular issue for the first time. So having a way to have that conversation in an ongoing fashion and invite more people into the listening group and into the committee, and as people tire out or find other interests that they'll leave the committee, I think that'll be helpful over time. I think Mary had mentioned once about an overzealous officer back in the early 2000s. I mean, these things happen, so it'll be good to have an ongoing channel for folks to plug into to get information and learn, and as well as voice their concerns when they have them. Next up is Fire, Trumansburg Chamber, and Village Events and Tourism Committee.
Hey, that's me. All those things.
That's you.
So thank you very much. So the fire report, is good. The call report will be received this week, and I'll put that in the Dropbox, and it will be given to the town if it's not already in the email already. I haven't checked recently. So that's coming. And then I would just say that the fire department had a pretty calm meeting this week. Matt and I will be looking in the next couple of weeks toward the ends of March to really plan out the rest of our budget year, which is already done, but to make sure we're on track and just look at what equipment he wants to do and make sure expenses are lined up with the budget year in which they were allocated. They are considering having in-person meetings starting next month, largely their vaccinated population, and they are having in-person trainings. So that's something to take notice of. The Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce is reinvigorated. So as I believe I mentioned, but maybe I didn't. So where they stood 2 months ago is that they had done this really hard work to tidy up all the mess that was made. And what they had to offer interested parties in the community was a fresh start with some core people who were very interested, but that was it. And they really needed, they have a seed. They have the seed of this 100-year-old great idea that has waxed and waned over its time. And so right now they are experiencing some renewed interest and are moving forward with putting together more board members and all of that. So stay tuned for where they end up. There I offered the village's support for their existence, of course. And that's where they're at, really sort of a fresh start and are primed for it. So I think we should feel good about the work that they've done there. And like 5 or 6 new people were interested with tremendous capacity. So I'm heartened. And then piggybacking that is the notion of the village, et cetera. So events, tourism committee. And we are still fledgling, but we are developing our course. We have spoken with Darlene, who formerly owned Life So Sweet candy store here in the village. You may have heard her name. So she is investigating and has put together a very interesting proposal of 3 layers for what Winterfest would look like. And so we're just in communication with her about, okay, but what does that mean? And again, it's advisory. It's sort of saying, recognizing you'll need to fundraise, and it's still moving forward that way. And so there's some traction. And I will meet with Sandy List to talk about the Taganic Giant and learn more about its history as we look to development of the Western Gateway, which needs a better name. So think about what a good name for that park would be, and not the Giant Hoax. It's not going to be the Giant Hoax Park. What else should you know? So I need to have a template for the website for the Village et cetera committee to be added to a page to be added to our website. And I just kind of wanted to get my team to finalize, to see it and say, yeah, we like this. So I can do that this week. I got knocked down 2 days last week, so I'm behind schedule there, but it's moving forward and we have an email and people are already commenting that they're excited. So I'm getting connections from people other ways saying, tell me what committee you want me to be on, what can happen. Does anyone have any questions? I feel like the identity of this committee is probably understood, but I want to make sure that it is. I'm just seeing nods and glasses. Nods, glasses, and thumbs. I'll take it. That's my report.
Thanks, Jess. Can somebody get Vicky a space heater, please? She looks really cold. So if there are no questions, if there are no questions or comments for Jessica, we will move on to EMS, youth, and street tree.
So actually, I don't really have reports for any of those things, except what I told Mary, which is that we're not required to have an Arbor Day celebration. The Arbor Day Foundation waived that again this year, which is, I think, a very reasonable thing to do. So we'll see how that goes. We may still try and do something, but it may also be later in the year, something maybe in conjunction with the State of the Village. Maybe that will be the topic that I'll talk about at the State of the Village. But in any case, moving on, it's been fairly quiet. I actually missed the last Youth Commission meeting, so I'm not really able to report on that. And EMS has been thankfully quiet, with the exception of a couple small personnel things. obviously I'll save for executive session, but I did want to report quickly on progress with clean energy communities and the community choice aggregation. And there has been some, so clean energy communities, I believe we're mostly familiar with. Jess, I don't know if you were, so clean energy communities is basically a program where communities can take on various projects. So I think one that we tried to do was to have an event where we encourage people to sign up for home solar. And based on various different things, Vicki and Ben have put a lot of work into benchmarking and keeping track of how much electricity the village uses and that kind of thing. So any number of these different action items earn you a certain number of points, and based on your points, you're then either awarded various levels of grants. So a new level, and that's something that the village participated in that Ben had basically pushed all of us through. Thanks, Ben. But now they've just released another, what they call the leadership round. So there's $800,000 worth of grants that are going out statewide, and we have another chance to do more action items, more indifferent action items to get that money, and to also, obviously, the action items are all sort of centered around making us, use cleaner energy or use less energy. So it's sort of a win-win in that respect. One of the cool things about this time is that some of the action items also have their own mini grants to go with it. So there's a couple action items, and I don't have the list in front of me now, but that come with a $5,000 mini grant just for doing that one item. But I have a spreadsheet that has all of those listed out that I'll send out, and I'm trying to meet with Tom hopefully soon to discuss because a lot of the items are obviously code related. One of the biggest one is adopting the New York State stretch code. And really, there's a lot that I need to talk with Tom about, so I'm not sure how that'll go, but that's where we stand right now. So it's basically just strategizing what we can do. So I'll send out that list to everyone, and any feedback that you have as far as what seems feasible, what doesn't, would be appreciated. Otherwise, I will start sort of shopping it around to department heads and Vicki, and we'll sort of move forward that way. And then, so community choice aggregation.
Wait, Ben, I'm sorry. Is that money state money? This is a state initiative? Okay.
Yeah.
And just as one quick aside on the stretch code, that's actually called out as an action in the draft comp plan. So that is something that was identified as interesting.
Right. There's actually a lot of sort of overlap in the comp plan. I mean,
That's why we do it.
Yep.
If we're doing it right.
The overlap was pretty clearly intentional, I would say. It was very nicely done. But anyway, so the community choice aggregation, this is another thing that Ben brought to us in the form of the draft legislation maybe a few months ago. But since then, Roden and I have gone to a couple meetings that Rod Howe and the TCOG Energy Subcommittee have put on. And the goal of those meetings is basically to move all of the municipalities in Tompkins County, or as many as are willing or able, towards community choice aggregation, which essentially means that we adopt local legislation that changes our default energy provider from NYSEG to another one of our choosing, which allows us to then negotiate, hopefully as a big sort of consortium of Tompkins County municipalities, for better rates and cleaner energy. It is tricky for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is just getting the other municipalities to agree on this is something that we want to do and this is the way that we want to do it. So right now, basically where that stands is that group is working on writing a grant. They actually, I hope, finished or finalized that grant either this morning or over the next couple of days. So that should be going out to the Park Foundation soon. And that is to fund a part-time position, essentially to coordinate and research that effort over the next year or so, which is pretty exciting as far as just, making sure that we keep putting one foot in front of the other. But the question that I have for this board is that the primary underlying decision and sort of the future fissure within this broader group is whether we do what's called CCA 2.0 or CCA 3.0. And essentially the difference is 2.0 is what I just described. You change the default. 3.0 is a much broader sort of community sustainability and also independence kind of a program. It builds out a lot of like energy infrastructure, so microgrids, renewable energy in your community. A lot. It's really a much more involved program, and it's a lot more. Well, it's just a lot more progressive overall. There's a lot of appeal there, but it is a little bit tricky as far as our positioning early on. So when there's a number of decisions sort of continuously about, do we want to set ourselves up to go for 3.0 or start with 2.0? I've talked with Ben a little bit about this, and I don't know if you've changed your mind since then, but I think at that point, we both agreed that the best approach is essentially to start with 2.0 and sort of build it like an on-ramp, right? So that we can move towards 3.0 if we can later. But I wanted to get feedback. It really comes down to a question of finance. So is it worth spending a lot of money to make it greener? Is really what it comes down to. But yeah, sorry, that's a little bit of a vague question, but
Yeah,
any feedback would be great.
I've been paying a little bit of attention to this, so I'll reiterate my position, which is I'm often of the opinion in all manners, not just this one, to like start small, get a foothold, move something forward, figure out what's next after that. So in that mindset, I'm very interested in kind of the 2.0 model. Start there, get something going. I don't see in any way how it precludes eventually moving towards a 3.0 model. But it gives us a place to accomplish something, gain some momentum, pat ourselves on the back, and then focus on the next piece. I do worry that trying to shoot for the moon at the beginning is a recipe for actually not getting anything done, and that would probably be my larger concern. And I don't know all the details, but I get some of the sense that that's happened in the past. This is kind of a conversation that continues to get kind of kicked off and flounder a bit. And I think it comes back to this trying to shoot for the moon thing. And I'd rather us focus on just something that's accomplishable near term that will have real impact and then move from there.
And obviously any thoughts offline is fine too. I don't really need to belabor this meeting. Since I know we have.
No, I was just going to say, Ben, I agree with Ben 100%. This is obviously not my bailiwick, but the meetings that I've attended with Rod have been very informative. I see no reason whatsoever that the 2.0 CCA, with using a consortium style model with anywhere from 10 to 14 or 15 municipalities joining in, I see no reason why that couldn't work. And I see no reason why we wouldn't have some pretty significant pricing power as the consumer in that instance. If 3.0 were to become the jumping off point, as we should shoot for the moon because the best is the best and we don't want anything less than that, you're going to lose. If we started with 14 participants, you're going to lose 12. I mean, there's just you really only have the city of Ithaca and the county itself, which, I don't know that they would do it, but the city of Ithaca and maybe the town of Ithaca could theoretically afford that kind of effort. But, the smaller municipalities, it's being able to move in that direction, for the municipalities that maybe pick up a public-private partnership somewhere down the road that helps them move in that direction. Great. But I think waiting on that is, we could be waiting a long time.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. I think there's a little bit of a selection bias that's happening in the committee. Obviously, it's the energy committee, so it's people who are really passionate about this, and they all are pushing. I've found myself the singular stick in the mud on this point at numerous points. So I feel it's really, I appreciate hearing all of you say that. But again, I'll leave it there. Any other feedback offline is fine too. And hopefully I'll send out the clean energy community thing within the next couple days.
Yeah, I feel like this is the first thing I'm hearing of this whole concept. So if I missed some other publications that were sent along, sorry. Uh, so
No,
just,
you did. You did.
okay, so just to say on record, yeah, small to big staged growth is great. Going towards independence whenever possible is our mission. That's it.
Okay. Well, if anyone has any additional thoughts on that, please email it to Ben. And we will move on to DPW, water, sewer, CPZR, and farmers market.
Sure. So in reverse order, farmers market, I have no updates at this point. I know we just chatted with them briefly about their budget. I think things are continuing to move forward as far as I'm aware. On the CPZR front, we are continuing to look at residential zoning. We're having conversations about accessory dwelling units, which is starting to make some comment on Facebook as well, which is great. I just want to kind of continue to, well, I should say that we did a survey as part of the comp plan. There was some kind of general support in the village for accessory dwelling units. We have a care cottage section of the zoning right now, which is fairly problematic for a number of reasons. And we're looking at, trying to find ways to create affordability in the village without building a lot of kind of specifically quote affordable housing, right? We kind of want to find that balance. So I think there's a lot of interesting conversation that comes together around this idea of accessory dwelling units. So that's where the focus is currently. Our next meeting will be next Monday, due to the police meeting, the police reimagining meeting or whatever on the Thursday. So that will be the next one. And of course, everyone's always invited to show up and listen in. On DPW front, so a couple different projects going on. The pedestrian bridge, we're moving forward with MRB surveying the area and putting a design together. That survey should hopefully happen either this month or next, weather depending, and their schedule and Dusty's schedule and so forth. So slowly moving forward towards something real there, which is exciting. With any luck, we'll have it open this year. Knock on wood. I hate saying that. That I retract that. I really hope it happens, but you never want to count these chickens. The sewer laws continue to move forward. We're still kind of hammering out just the final details around what's called equivalent dwelling units. Yeah, dwelling units. A lot of dwelling units conversations this week. That is kind of a rough calculation of how much water one uses versus what that amounts to a sewer rate for houses that are not single family residential or residential units where that's just one. But what do you do for the supermarket or a business or so forth? So we're figuring that out. But at that point, we're pretty close there, and then it'll go for review to Guy, which will be its own quest, and then we'll figure out where we go from there. Roden and I had a good chat with MRB around stormwater work. That's relating to the DASNY money, the state money that have been awarded but have not been given yet. The work is primarily on East Seneca Road, kind of coming down by Marty's house and down towards Congress, and then around the curve to Congress Street is a large part of it. And then additional work down Congress and onto Seneca Street as well. So we're just continuing to move forward. MRB will get that up to just, everything ready minus kind of last dotting of I's and crossing of T's and dates and so forth to put out to bid. And we'll go ahead with that once we know the DASNY money is actually going to get released, so that we don't kind of end up holding the bag on having a quote and having a bid. And DASNY is still kind of holding on that money. And then, as I mentioned, last budget meeting, but not everyone listens to budget meetings. We have decided to pause on the water extension around the cemetery bridge project. We will still, for a number of reasons, it didn't work out. It would have had to been a much larger project for the village to undertake and working outside of the area that's going to be impacted by the bridge, which made it a much more costly endeavor. with surveying beyond what's being already done for the bridge and so forth. So the county has graciously allowed us to, or it will include in their work fixings on the bridge for later installation of a water main, if and when we get around to doing the larger project, but we're going to leave it at that. So we are moving on from that project. That is all of the fun things that the DPW is up to right now.
Any questions or comments for Ben? Just as an additional thought to the, what is, I guess, a little bit disappointing, not being able to close that dead end loop around the Cemetery Road Bridge. One of the things that Ben and I are tasking Dusty with moving forward is I would like to have GIS mapping of all of our water and sewer mains and associated laterals. And I think what that is going to show us is areas where there are either dead ends or smaller than current code water mains. So for fire suppression and water flow and pressure, there will be other areas where there can be some work done. So keeping in mind the Cemetery Road area, adding to it anything we find once the mapping is done. I'm anticipating that there will be some grant money available over the next few years to improve those areas. So hopefully it won't be too long before we can take advantage of the new fittings that will be available for us on the Cemetery Road Bridge.
Actually, real quick, just to point out on the potential grant funding, I had written this down, but I was going to skip over, but let's go for it anyhow. There are grants available through community development block grants, which the village is within hundredths of a percent of qualifying for, tenths of a percent. It's very, very close based on income, median income for the village. And since most of this would be for water and or sewer work, we're getting quotes to survey outside water and sewer customers to gain income information there, to combine that with the income information we have in the village, with the hope that that might get us over that line to qualify for these grants. We're within a couple of people at the right kind of income level to qualify. So if that works out well, that might open up other grant funding opportunities for us.
Good. Any other questions or comments for Ben? And next up, we have police, Keith, and I did sneak in there a portable radio quote for you.
Yeah, so I'll run through the stats real quick and then we can jump to the radio, which is in the Dropbox. So 257 calls for service during February. 2 of the calls were outside the village, where we assisted with the sheriff's department and a criminal mischief investigation and an injured animal complaint. I don't know if that's complaining that the animal was injured or it's, I'm not going to look into it. So criminal investigations, we had a burglary investigation, a dispute/fight, 4 domestic incidences, 2 fraud investigations, an assault investigation, 3 trespass complaints, and 2 harassment complaints. And then about 180 or so non-criminal investigations. We did execute 2 warrants of arrest. First warrant was for grand larceny, and the second warrant was for robbery. So that's about it in terms of what the department was up to in the last month, besides Chief giving his time to help with some of the proposals that we did and making himself available for the community meetings as well. And so in the Dropbox, there is a quote for a portable radio in the amount of $2,771.36. We would like to purchase this, I believe, from the contractual line of their budget.
Yeah, so it'll be coming out of contractual, not a reserve, but because of the dollar amount, we did need board approval. When we're talking about a portable radio, those of us over a certain age will refer to these as walkie-talkies, but they are not cheap. We actually need, I think, at least 3 new ones because the older ones are past their serviceable life. So Chief will probably be looking to buy at least one a year, one a budget year. So we may actually see this again after June to try to replace some of those older radios. This we get through Tompkins County Emergency Response on their state contract bid. So it does save us a fair bit. So I would entertain a motion, Keith, if you'd like to move that we approve spending $2,771.36 on a new portable radio for the police department.
Yes, I would move that we spend $2,771.36 for a new portable radio for the police department.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions, conversation? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we'll let Chief know to get the radio.
And I think that's really all I have. We talked a lot police early in the meeting, so not going to eat up more time.
Next, Treasurer Vicky.
It's just been a lot of budget stuff. I have corrected the little blue lines that we had put in at the budget working session regarding the bridge issue, and it was an MRB thing that should have been charged to the engineering contractual line. So I have fixed that. The only thing I am waiting on is I have a Zoom call tomorrow with Bailey Place to get the correct insurance quotes to basically compare apples to apples. Because right now there's a few things that he was missing and we have to separate out sewer and water. So by the budget working session on Tuesday, should have all those figures for you so you can compare the prices. February bank statements are in. That is my plan for Thursday to have those all complete. So you, Jess, if you're going to talk to Matt, I know it's important to burden with budgets and reserves. You should have the end of February numbers hopefully by the end of the week. Okay. Other than that, I'm pretty much caught up. So going back to 2 days at home and 2 days in the office, but if I need to be in the office, I'll go in, but things are pretty good right now. I think that's about it. Don't forget about the budget working session next Tuesday at 6.
Any questions or comments for Vicky? Did you get a hold of Tompkins Insurance today, Vicky?
No, I was kind of waiting to talk to Bailey Place tomorrow before I emailed them, because I want to make sure that I have the right numbers to show them that Bailey Place is quoting us, because there was some things that Jeremy had in an email today that we have with Tompkins Insurance that are not in his quote.
Oh, so you're thinking his number is going to come up?
Yes. And I just want Eric to have the right number, you know, because that wouldn't be fair to him to send him a quote that's 11 grand less than they have, and it really isn't that number.
I would send him an email tomorrow regardless, and just let him
Okay.
know that we are, that we have been approached. We have not solicited. We have been approached by some other brokers
Okay.
who are providing quotes, and just to let him know, and whether he wants to just take a look at everything and make sure it's as low a number as he can provide.
Okay. I was trying to figure out how to approach that. I knew I was going to say that we didn't put out anything for quotes, because it really would be next year that they approach.
No, I would just keep it simple. I would just say that we were approached by another broker who is providing quoting on the insurance, and wanted to just make sure he was aware, and that if he would like to double check all of the carriers' pricing
Okay.
to see if he can squeeze that a little bit, then we would
Okay.
appreciate it.
Okay. I can, so you don't think he needs the numbers?
He doesn't need to know who, and he doesn't need to know how much. He just needs to know
Okay.
that if he can double check the carrier's pricing, then we would appreciate that.
Okay, I can absolutely do that. I was just wanted to make sure that we had the right information. So that's fine. But I have a Zoom call with Jeremy tomorrow about going over it to make sure it's exactly the same as the policy we have right now.
Okay. And you can CC me on that email there, Eric.
Yeah, no problem. I think other than that, you know, probably once June 1st rolls around and things are normal, I'll work on revamping the budget, because you wanted fire and EMS to start working on their budgets in June.
Right.
So I'd say the first or second week in June, Jess, I'll have, and Ben Carver, I'll have those budgets, new ways to do it for you guys. I think that's, you know, about it, trying to plan for next February and what I'm going to hand off and what that kind of stuff. So.
All right. Any questions or comments for Vicki?
Oh, one more thing, and I don't know if you want to talk about this in the budget working session, but I just wanted to let you guys know, when you look at the budget, the transportation line for code, I had to move down to like, I think it's 9785, because it has to be under a lease code for New York State. We didn't delete it. I just moved it. So if you happen to notice that, that's what happened to it.
Okay. Next up is clerk squared.
So what have we been doing, Morgan? So Morgan and I spent a lot of time for the month of February going over civil service stuff, trying to create a street address database in the Swift 911. And of course, as you probably all know, we got the chance to use that last week to see how the specified street addresses went, and I think it went pretty well. It's going to be a little clunky as people add to it, but I have a call into Jeff Dunn, and I'm hoping that we can figure out a better way than manually going in and overwriting it, because again, it's just not really efficient. What else? So the other things that were on my list were to remind you about the public hearing for the budget and Joe's appointment to a permanent position, and to ask about the May yard sale date. So do we just want to go ahead as we normally would, providing something doesn't change, with gathering, and just not rent out the space at the farmer's market, knowing that we're going to be there in the morning?
How much revenue does that represent?
Next to nothing. We do it for $10 a booth. And
Okay,
it literally is to just
cover,
hold people
Your-
accountable for like their garbage and, that kind of stuff.
okay.
I would be tempted to look at the weekend prior, the weekend of the 15th.
That's Mother's Day weekend.
No, Mother's Day is the 8th.
Yeah, Mother's Day is the week
Oh,
before
is it
that.
early?
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Simply because if we have village residents who want to do a yard sale but want to attend the state of the village meeting, I hate for them to have to choose because we know which way
Right.
they'll choose.
Right.
So I think the week prior would be better.
Okay. Oh, yep, you're right. So Mother's Day is the 9th. So let's do Saturday the 15th.
Yeah, I think that works unless there's another event going on that we're not aware of.
Nope. Not that I'm aware of.
I did talk to Janice Fassard with Trumansburg Garden Club. That is the weekend that they were also planning their plant sale
Mhm.
because of the community yard sale. Just to let you, when he said other.
Which weekend?
Don't we usually have the yard sale the third weekend in May? So
It's generally the Saturday after Mother's Day. So
Yeah.
when I said the 22nd, it was because I thought Mother's Day was the 16th.
right,
Okay.
so that's the same, that Saturday is the same day that the ladies were gonna have their plant sale because people would be in the village for the community yard sales if we have it. Janice was gonna contact you, Tammy, about getting on the list,
Okay, I'll email her.
so.
Thank you.
Okay. Just to add a little bit of color to what Tammy said a moment ago, I had asked her and Morgan there's a way within the Swift 911 system, individuals have to sign it themselves up. We can't sign other people up, but once they are signed up, you can create lists. And then you can contact the individual lists. You don't have to send out a message, an emergency message community wide. So I asked Morgan and Tammy to create lists by street address. And so now when there's a water main break on Hugo Street, they can send an emergency notification to those folks who have signed up for Swift 911 who live on Hugo Street. So she mentioned they got to test that out. I think Jessica and Ben Carver, I'm not sure if you're aware, we had a pretty significant water main break this past Tuesday, so a week ago tomorrow. Fortunately, there was actually a second one on Wednesday, but our first and second water main breaks of the year. Unfortunately, for the Tuesday water main break, we had just shipped off our old backhoe, which we sold on Monday. And the new backhoe, which we purchased, arrived on, you guessed it, Wednesday. So Tuesday, the water main broke and didn't have a backhoe to use. So that put a little wrinkle in the whole equation. But the guys made do and got that taken care of. But having having a street list based way to send out emergency notifications, I think will be more and more helpful as we move forward. So, any questions from anyone for Morgan or Tammy? All right. So we have under old business, we have our budget working session. I had allocated a half hour. I don't know if we'll need that much. What I'd like to do tonight is just hopefully complete the general budget. And then next Tuesday night, we can do water and sewer, which should be fairly brief. They're relatively straightforward and self-explanatory. I will just dive right in. If there's anything that anyone wants to look at, discuss, or cover, we certainly can. But if we start in the general budget under expenses, we had some highlighted items for discussion. Vicki and I have talked about NICOM fall training a little bit. She's willing to, depending on whether there is a fall training or not and what that might look like, she is willing to forego it if it will help the budget. So Vicki, I would actually like to reduce that line to 4,000 from the 5,500, unless there's a board objection. My gut tells me, and this is based on nothing other than a hunch, my gut tells me that a lot of the trainings you'll see this year and a lot of the seminars and gathering type of things, that many of them will occur with a remote option or a virtual option. And I think that that will be by necessity. I think we will see that continue for the rest of 2021. So we can certainly take advantage of those things if there's additional funds available, or if scheduling makes it more convenient to take certain classes, as Jessica mentioned last time, pick and choose the sessions you want to attend, kind of thing. That'll be useful. The next line I wanted to adjust was, or I'll point out, I think you did make this change. There's a training line a few lines down, which is earmarked for DPW.
Yes, I
It's
did that.
it's a 1640.412, just for the board to be aware. Did you ever find receipts for that line, Vicki?
Yes, it was, a lot of it in the past 3 years have been training that Dusty had done for supervisory
Oh,
training.
right. Okay. So that line has been reduced to 500. There are some trainings that both he and Dana and Pat will be taking, but they're all coming out of water. So we don't need 1,000 there. We'll keep 500 in there just in case.
I think the other money that was put in there last year, if I remember correctly, is because Debbie had intended at least one, if not two of them, to go to NICOM Highway DPW school. And then the pandemic hit, and I believe that class actually got canceled. But that was one of the schoolings that the guys were going to start going to, but hadn't.
Okay.
Warden, before you go down any farther, can we go back up to the engineer contractual? We didn't put anything in there until I had done the research.
Which line is that?
A1440.4.
Yeah. I think I would just as soon leave that blank. I don't see any, I don't know, Ben Darfler. I can't think of anything in the June 1 fiscal year that is going to require DPW engineering that isn't water or sewer.
Yeah, we should have the bridge engineering done by then. We'll have like materials and time, but not engineering.
Okay.
Not off the top of my head, yeah.
And are we gonna leave the law contractual, which is the line above it, at 10,000?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other one was, the building insurance. Okay.
If we scroll down to A3120.4, police contractual, I'll break the bad news to Joe, but I'm looking for some wiggle room because I'm trying to engineer the tax rate. So if we can make that 15,000.
Okay.
A5110.4, the street maintenance contractual, which is basically paving. Ben, have you talked to, well, we would use chips for the larger sections of road. So I'm not sure, it's only $500, but let's make that an even 13,000, just
Okay.
because.
Okay.
The village, et cetera line, Events and tourism,
Yes.
we have at 2,500. Jess, I think that's only going to be able to be 1,500 this go around.
Okay. It's great.
Okay.
And then Vicky, that DPW equipment reserve line is going to have to be 45.
Okay. I did sit with Dusty the other day, just after our meeting, and I think it would have worked with the 40. It would have left them about $11,000.
No, because he just sent us the most recent dump truck. It was 60.
Oh, okay. Okay. That I didn't know. So,
60 for the dump truck, not including the plow and salter. So
oh, okay. That he was then, yeah. Okay.
I
No problem.
thought he'd said that quote included a plow. Was it?
yeah, it was 67 with the plow.
Okay, got it.
Unless I
So
misread it.
yeah, as long as we pulled that out.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, I've got 66,000 and change. Unless there's anything on here associated with the plow.
The only
Yeah, no,
thing I
there
have
should be. There's a snow plow package on there for 225. I don't know what else would go with that. That's pretty minor though.
Well, it needs a plow package. It's just the plow itself is 6650.
Oh yeah, there it is.
So maybe the quote will come in lower. We can wiggle it. This is the old quote. He hasn't got the up-to-date one from the Ford dealership.
Yeah, so it'd be closer to 60 without that plow and package then.
So I think the only thing we have left is the insurances.
Okay. Any other line items that anyone from the board had any questions about, thoughts about, desires to change? Vicky, I am going to have you for the appropriated sidewalk ban,
Yep.
highlight that. We're going to play around with that number.
The appropriate. Oop, okay. You mean the principal?
No, in revenue.
Oh, so sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah, A 5031. You have it for 15,000. We're going to play with that.
Okay, okay.
And then obviously we're going to play with fund balance a little bit. So for next Tuesday, hopefully we will have finalized insurance quote numbers.
Yes.
And then for the board for next Tuesday night, we'll have a look at what the tax rate is going to look like based on some wiggling around of the fund balance number and the sidewalk ban leftover money number.
Hopefully, Rorden, I will have to you the budget spreadsheet with the numbers, hopefully by Thursday, maybe Friday.
Okay. My hope is if we're lucky, fingers crossed, we'll be able to keep the tax rate flat. This would be the second year in a row we've kept it flat. I'm a little nervous about keeping things flat for too long because that can come around and catch us if we need an increase for some reason, but I think it can be done. So we'll have that conversation next Tuesday. Water and sewer shouldn't take very long.
Do you have thoughts on fund balance? At this point, we have obviously the auditor's number, but it feels like we're going to be substantially under that.
No, I don't think we will. So the auditor's number was 519,000, which represents just shy of 18% of our budget. I'd be willing to spend some of that, but I'd like to keep the number above 15% of our budget. This year, Ben, and I'll just run through this very quickly. No need to go line by line, but for this year's budget that we're in, we are $44,000 better on the revenue side due to some insurance payments and some couple pieces of equipment that got sold for 12,000. Prior year expenses that were refunded back into this year, or there was a miscellaneous income number. So we're 44,000 to the better on the revenue side. On the expense side, the line you and I love so much is obviously going to be way over, but we're actually I gotta scroll to the right place. All in, including the additional revenue, and you can thank Chief Joe for not hiring that second officer yet. We're actually going to be about 63,000 to the good. I'm hoping by the end of the year, even with our overtime woes in EMS. So I'm hoping that we are actually going to see that audited fund balance increase slightly. So I'm okay with using some into next year's budget.
Right. I feel like, the plan last year was to start moving towards tax stabilization. And if the big pain of this year is starting to use appropriated fund balance again, I will feel really, really positive about that.
Right. And I hadn't actually thought about what's in tax stabilization. Yeah, there's nothing in tax stabilization. So,
right. I think we said last year we were going to start contributing again.
Right.
Like we'd cycled back to that stage, and apparently pandemics change your planning. But
well, two things. One is pandemics changed that. Also, there was no village-wide reassessment done this year. So that made a big difference. So they'll have to catch up in the next year or two, and we'll see what it looks like at that point. Any other comments, questions, thoughts on budget? Just making a quick note here. Okay. So the next Tuesday, we will hopefully finalize this, and then we will take care of water and sewer. On to new business. So we're going to initiate, and this is just the very initial discussion, we're going to initiate our board level conversation of the draft comprehensive plan. And for anyone who sees this after the fact or who may be watching at home, I will just take a moment to once again acknowledge all of the, it's got to be in the many hundreds of hours at this point, many hundreds of hours of individual time and effort on behalf of the Comp Plan Zoning Revision Committee. Thank you, Ben, for all of your hard work steering that ship. I have heard, well, I won't even say what I've heard. This has been a long process already. We're coming up this summer would be 3 years. So I'm not only pleased with the work and the progress, and thankful for all of your hard work, and I'm proud of what the committee has accomplished. It is by no means and by no stretch of the imagination will anyone be able to legitimately say that the process was in any way rushed or cursory. It was in depth, and it took as much time as it needed. And now we have what I think is a very good draft, comprehensive plan revision. Keyword being draft. So now we get to tear it apart and put it back together again and make any comments. I will say that by definition, comprehensive plans are broad overview visions. They are a compilation of what we have gleaned from the community is the overall community's vision for the community. It is not the granular level. You know, do we want 5-foot setbacks or 7-foot setbacks? That comes later. I will also point out, and Ben, correct me if my numbers are wrong, but I believe that our survey response rate was some 20% higher than the survey that was used to develop the first comprehensive plan. You know, in actual numbers, we're around 300 people, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's between 20 and 25% of the adult population of the village. Most national surveys, they expect a 10 to 15% response rate. So 20 to 25% is certainly better than that. And the fact that I had some concerns about how would this compare to the effort in the 2005 to 2008 timeframe, because there was a lot of kind of boots on the ground effort to get that survey out, and the fact that we got more respondents than that effort makes me feel good about the product. So
In a pandemic, mind you.
and yes, in a once in a century global pandemic. So with that, I'll kind of hand it off to you a little bit, Ben. I do want to kind of jump right in, but I don't know if you have a sense of what you want from the board first. We have the document that we can edit online, of course. I don't know if it's as simple as starting with that and working our way through. I don't want to, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we can take just a few pages to start with, but I do want to studiously or steadfastly begin this process for us, going through all of the comments on that document online, as well as now taking into account the comments rather that the planning board submitted. I do expect we will get commentary from the ZBA here at some point. And then of course we'll have plenty of public comment and input as we move forward.
Yeah. So I'll be forthright. I hadn't given it a ton of thought as to how we might approach this. I will kind of reiterate the guidance I have given in the past, which is, for kind of grammatical or small fixes, that sort of level of thing, I would encourage people to go into the online document and just either add them as a comment or do an inline suggested edit. I think that's be the most effective use of our time. Without having a real good sense of kind of where people's heads are at, maybe we can just kind of start there. But I think what I think would be best spent with our time here is to kind of talk about the larger either omissions or structural changes that we might want to talk about. I think the level of commentary that the planning board gave was a good kind of guide of that. I think Rick had suggested they might go in and make direct edits for smaller things, but kind of these larger concerns here would be a good place to have a conversation. I'm happy to lead us through, kind of chapter by chapter, if that would be valuable. And I see at least one nodding head, so maybe we can start there. But otherwise, I'm happy to kind of let other folks lead if there's a particular place we wanted to jump to. So maybe some feedback at that point.
Well, Ben, having worked with you on various iterations of this process, I might A, say thank you, B, say I couldn't hear anything but uproarious applause from the public. So that's all I heard. Okay, I didn't hear anything. But I wonder if maybe we as a board in this meeting for this purpose might give an overall feedback, our first sort of things, big things, and then take the remaining time to start to chunk it out and start at the beginning and then go all the way through, because I do think that it's a dense document. And I think that, again, not grammar, so I won't bring up any of my, hey, that was past tense, but that's present in the same sentence issues. But what do you think about that? And if everyone's nodding, then I would say, I thought it was great. I think that as the former comp plan was digestible in its size, it was lacking in substance. I would like to see something perhaps in between what we are looking at right now. I found that some of the, particularly when we're talking about the natural resources and the cultural assets, that there's a lot of repetition of commenting on them, and yet in no one place did it seem comprehensive. Like the Habitat Trail, I don't think was mentioned at all. The Water Tower Park wasn't mentioned until in the middle of the document. So some of those sorts of things, I think that we might be able to grab some of that and condense it a little bit. And in general, if anyone else had the same sort of notion of, if we want this document to actually be read and utilized by people, we might want to have a bent of editing that's a little bit less verbose. So those are my initial feedback.
Ben Carver or Keith?
I'll jump in. I mean, I think generally speaking, I agree with everything that Jess just said. It was a little bit, I mean, on the one hand, first of all, it's a very impressive document. I mean, it's obviously like just the amount of research into what Trumansburg is, and the specificity with which Trumansburg is defined, I think is impressive. It really, it's a lot. But it's also a lot kind of in a bad way if, as Jess says, human beings are supposed to be using this document in a practical sense. But it's also, I mean, I don't think you want to get rid of that information, but I think just reshuffling it so that maybe that's at the end rather than, you know, before the recommendations and that kind of thing might be helpful. I don't know. But I think mostly I'd just like to sort of echo what Roden and Jess said, which is that I think it's an impressively worked document. I have been continuously impressed throughout the process just with the outreach that has been done, and the I think, to be perfectly blunt, as a village, the thing that we do least well is sort of putting forward you know, proactive outreach. And I think it's worth pointing out that, Ben, you did that in this case just magnificently well. And if there was ever a time to do it well, this was definitely that time. I'm really very happy to see that, like, a vision for what the village is will come from such a real and like appropriately grounded kind of a space and an effort. So I really very much appreciate that. The one thing I think that I was sort of looking for in it that I didn't find, and I did find it a lot in the comments, but not in the actual draft, was, well, I did, so there's a section that suggests that we cap retail stores and sort of prohibit big box stores. And I was expecting to see something similar relating to residential developments, some kind of cap or something, because a lot of this obviously was born out of like South Street hysteria, for lack of a better word. And there were a lot of comments that were like, you know, really, you know, grossly exaggerated development is not what I want. And what I think this does a really, really good job of is saying, like, you know, to some degree, whether you want development or not, it's inevitable. So it's a matter of sort of shaping it and doing it incrementally and all of those things, which I think are great. But I was really expecting to see some kind of cap or some sort of negative term on, you know, on residential development. But yeah, I'll end there.
Keith, any thoughts?
I just want to, again, yeah, I won't belabor the point too much, but just want to say thank you and express admiration over the document and the process. I think this committee was convened, seems like right after I joined the board. And so to think of it's how long that's been going on, you know, and everyone to stay with it. And I know there's been people dropping off, people added on, and having to, you know, that can't be easy to keep that momentum going. So certainly appreciate all the work on that. I don't really have any, I think the idea of some sort of Cliff's Notes for this is a great idea. You know, first rule of journalism, you know, make it so everybody can get through it quickly and understand it. You know, you see that in a lot of like news articles now online. It have like the 5 bullets for here's what you're going to take away from this article if you don't want to read the article. I don't want to leave it to just that, but you know, I think it can be important to offer some highlighted points. And it has me thinking about that regarding to the police proposal as well, for that matter. But no, I think it's great. I do wonder, I was looking at, I really get intrigued with demographic statuses in terms of age of residents. And I was a little surprised if I read it right, that the projections of number of children in the schools actually going down in the future. And I guess that's not surprising considering national trends of birth rates are dangerously low from what I understand. And so we do seem to still have an aging population. I wonder though if we'll see any kind of a shift in that, in part because of the pandemic. It seems like we have had a recent, and I can't quantify this, but from what my feeling is over the past year, we've had a little bit of an influx of out of town families moving into the village. And I don't know if that's a trend we'll continue to see that will move any of those numbers. But I just wonder how much the pandemic year could cause any kind of a shift in some of that data, and will we need to account for it in some of the long-term planning? I imagine the mayor might have some insight into home sales and who's bought them and all that kind of stuff. But that was one takeaway is, will the pandemic change any of those demographic stats? Did it change? We probably won't know for a little while, but yeah, I mean, I think it's Tompkins County in general has always had this issue of a more aging population, and how do you do with that? I was really surprised to see the average number of people per dwelling was 1 to 2. That kind of tells me a lot about future planning, just looking at those numbers. So great data, really makes me think about some things that I wasn't really thinking about before. And I look forward to seeing how this continues to play out.
And to that, I think we should probably bear in mind that this is a study that's done, or a comprehensive plan that was taken before the build out at South Street. So in terms of new population of viable childbearing years, it's presumed that the school district will increase when that build happens.
One of the things I've always been fascinated by comprehensive planning, at least in this state, it's the only state I'm familiar with comprehensive planning, is, the recommendation or best practices from New York State is that comprehensive plans should be revised every 10 years and reviewed for things like demographic changes and such every 5 years. When you think about the amount of work that just went into this process to this point, that would basically be a continual process without an end, because by the time you're done with a revision, it'll be time to start reviewing the data from the last revision. But it will be curious to see over the next 2 to 3 years if we can sense or gain any insight into what might have changed over the last 18 months since the surveys were done. The only comments I have, I've already shared. I'm looking at the planning board's comment. I think the executive summary cliff notes that Keith mentioned would be helpful up front. And then I also think that something we talked about, Ben, the comparison from what has changed or not. And I know you did send Walt and company that email, so I think that'll be helpful to see, because I don't see, other than the survey data, it'd be interesting to see what's changed there demographically. But in terms of kind of the goals and visions of the community, it isn't like something that was the least important in 2008 is suddenly the most important today, or vice versa. What the community seems to want has stayed fairly steady over time. So I think that's good to see, number one, but it also would be helpful to see side by side 08 versus 2000. Well, I guess this was ready in 2020, the draft was. So from 08 to 20, what has changed or not as we get into the public meeting and public hearing side of things.
And to that end, Gordon, I think that that will help the people who were heavily involved feel like their voice wasn't just for naught. Like it's
Right.
still part of the record. It's still moving
Right.
on. Did you, I can't remember now. Do you ask any sort of, do you have a vision of the village for 20 years in the survey? Do you have it? Did you take any sort of?
I don't, not really. The survey, we attempted to keep it rather numerical as best we could. There was an initial questionnaire, which was different than the survey that came out in the first public meeting pre-pandemic, and the questions on there escape me, but I think they were more like kind of SWOT analysis based. So maybe not quite as much of what's your particular vision, but it was a little bit more qualitative and kind of open-ended questions there.
So looking at the planning board's notion of, they want to see the 20-year vision, and what Roden just said, maybe it's, if that wasn't really data that was taken now, it's just sort of a note of what it was in 2008. But I did like, actually, and I'm glad that you mentioned their comments, Roden, the notion of adding maps into the document more. Did you see that comment? I think that breaking up is it's a diagram, but it helps you with your sense of place. This is where we're talking about, sort of stuff.
Ben, do you know what, I guess it would be Erica's plan was with respect to all of the, I'm just scrolling through the comments on the Word doc online. Do you know if she was planning to go ahead and incorporate these, or are we supposed to flesh them out and then tell her what to incorporate and what not? I mean, some of it is not grammatical, but I mean, I had a comment in here about Smith Woods. I mean, there's a couple things that are kind of just go ahead and edit, but I don't know if she wants us doing that in line or she's going to do it.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my question back here is a little bit of, where do we want this work to land? And if we don't have opinions, I'm happy to talk with EDR and try and get a sense there as well. Obviously we can pass a lot of this off to EDR. For larger changes, if we're interested in taking those on, maybe we should have the committee kind of get back involved in some of these pieces. So I don't know if you or others on the committee had a sense of that. And like I said, I'm happy to kind of chat with EDR. I think for smaller things, certainly for the kind of basic edits or small comments of, can you add this in here? I think EDR can just take that, but I don't know, for some of the larger potential kind of, let's restructure some things, move stuff around, I think it's good feedback. I'm just kind of unclear, I guess, where that work would land and who would kind of champion that stuff at this point, where we want that to go.
I feel like that's our work. Isn't that our work? Especially if it's
I was afraid you were going to say that.
But it is. I mean, so I know that I made a tremendous amount of suggestions online, and then I stopped because I was like, oh, where is this going? And is someone assuming I have the authority to say, no, change it this way, when really what I was saying is, I think this, and it was a suggestion. I think that, but I don't think it's as dense as you think, Gordon. We can get.
No, it's really not. I'm scrolling through them now.
But I do, for example, the National Forest isn't mentioned once. That's
Right.
nuts. And it may be because we're at the Western Gateway, but like, that's huge. It's 5 miles from here. That's definitely an asset. And some of those things. And then the statement about recognizing the Native Americans that were here before us, super great, really should be sensitivity checked and will be, but like that. So I think that we as a board probably have some substantive things about that kind of information, being sensitive to not change the fact that this is, in a way, the voice of the people. This isn't the voice of the board, right? So that's been where I think that's your job as ambassador, to say, well, that's a great suggestion, Jessica, but I think that sounds like you and not like the data, right?
Right. Well, I mean, that would be a reason why, for instance, the National Forest may not have been mentioned. I mean, it is very village centric. Just looking at the calendar here very
Except
quickly.
it isn't. They mention the state parks. We talk about the Tompkins County. We talk about COVID. I mean, it's sort of like the area resources. If you're gonna go, I don't know. To me, that seemed like a. They didn't mention Schuyler County at all, and Hector is part of our school district, or maybe there's one place. So it's definitely a demographic that feeds our village. Whether or not our villagers recognize it, it is definitely there and speaks to the heart of our community in a larger body. But now we're maybe getting into the notion of section work, right? Like that came up in a very specific sort of place in the document.
Right. So at the risk of making more late nights for us, we do have 2 more meetings scheduled just for this month. So we have our budget working session next. What day is this?
Tuesday.
We do have our budget working session next Tuesday, the 16th. My anticipation is that the budget work itself should be much less than an hour. We'll have the general budget done with a tax rate associated with it, I hope. And water and sewer is pretty, I mean, it's a build budget, so it's pretty straightforward. We could, if you want, set aside an hour from 7 to 8 to
What day is
start.
that again? I'm sorry.
Next Tuesday, the 16th.
Next Tuesday. Okay.
We could set aside the first hour for budget and then the second hour to begin just crawling through the document on using the online version and looking at each piece of comment there as we go section by section. And then the same thing could be said for the 29th. Now, the 29th is the night we're hopefully going to meet to adopt the police reform proposal. I think that we will have already had the public meeting of it. So this board, I don't imagine we will we'll have a final draft document that needs to be submitted to the state 2 days later. So I'm hoping that we're not going to have too many edits to make. But if we have discussion, I don't want to limit it, but I don't know that if anyone thinks that we will be discussing it for more than an hour. So perhaps we could take the second half of that meeting and continue the comp plan crawl. Because I think we're going to need several of those type of budget working session style meetings if we are going to crawl through the comp plan, make the edits rather than handing it back off either to the committee or the EDR, and then just do the work.
That makes total sense to me. I think that's a good allocation of time, but I guess I'm trying to see how I can best prepare and how we might best prepare, which would be, let's look at this document. Let's make our own comment so that when we get to the section, we make sure we address that comment. Or do we want to see that all before we come together to go over it? Because I'm not loving the online document with everybody's access to it. I feel like that starts to get
right
with the committee in there and the EDR in there, which to me sounds like, in a way, if I were EDR, I'd be like, hey, you guys sort out what you want us to change and then put it on. Let us know. Don't be like doing this over there. So in a way, it's like maybe there's a board, maybe we cut and copy and paste as it is, and as a board we talk about the document. If you want to have one, do you know what I mean? Have one board version of Word online or Google Doc that we're all commenting on. Again, grammar aside.
I don't know. I'd rather have comments from everybody in here. Is the thought? Are you thinking a comment? We would each individually have our own document, or as a board we would have our own document?
As a board, have a document that we're making comment on.
Because I mean, I'm just kind of skimming the comments here, but they're mostly you and Roden.
I know, and then I stopped because I was like, who else is on here, and is this what EDR is reading, and is this what they're thinking the final comments are? Are we going to go through them and reject or resolve? So
I
working
would,
at the
so
Corning Museum of Glass, I've seen some super scary comments go through committee
I would
and a leadership
suggest,
board of
I
12.
would suggest we use this document and this board goes through and rejects the results.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
And I don't really care if it's a planning board member, zoning board, our board, CPZR. It's not open to the public. So it's just,
Okay,
it's just the 3 boards and CPZR that has access to it. So I don't really care who's commenting. But I think you're right, Jessica. I think we're the ones that have to look at this and say, some of it is grammatical, like village should be capitalized throughout, but others of it is, what to include and what not. And if it's not something related to the survey results, then we have to determine whether it's within the scope of a comprehensive plan document or not.
and a side note, because I can't go to bed without saying it, because there is a section that's simply just geographical and historical background that is not generated from the survey, but is a time and place piece, that's certainly where the National Forest could get mentioned, for example. Like there are sections in this that are not completely just survey driven.
and I'll check in with EDR and how they want to run this. I would like to see, just to pick one out of the air. I saw Roden said, add something about the Cayuga Wine Trail here. I'd like to see if we can't have EDR do that level of kind of, execution. When it's larger sections, I think we should probably take a pass. If it's small grammaticals, we can just add them in there and they can accept it, or we can even accept it. So yeah, I'd like to find a way where we're not kind of writing a lot whole cloth, but if we can point out key things, just like you're saying, like please include National Forest here.
Habitat trail.
And they can write a sentence or two. The habitat trail might be nice if we can give them a little bit of detail about it. They may not know about that specifically, but yeah, hopefully we can kind of find a balance where, we can give a lot of guidance and they can kind of come back around with another final draft. But I will validate that with EDR and make sure that
Well,
that's out.
I think, Ben, when you're talking to them about it, it can be as simple as some of these things we will just reject as a board. Some of these things we will make the edits, in which case we can remove the comment. And then there'll be a half a dozen or so comments left that we expect EDR to implement.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to know when they log in and see it that, well, I guess these 5 are for me, whoever that person is, Walter, Erica, or whoever.
Right.
Okay, so the online document is our source of truth and our touchstone for communication for our next meeting.
Correct.
Those are some big words I just said there. Tammy, did you write those down? Touchstone, source of truth. This is good stuff.
And must be getting late. All right, so we'll plan on an hour next Tuesday dedicated to the comp plan after the budget. Okay, any other comp plan comments before we move on? Then we are up to item number 10 on the agenda, which is our second public comment period. There are no members of the public unless Ann or Mary have anything they would like to add before we bid the two of you good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, you guys.
Good night, Ann. Thanks.
Right.
Then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss a couple of personnel issues or personnel items.
Second.
A motion and a second.
I'm sorry, who was first?
Ben, me. This Ben.
Thank you, Ben Darfler. Thank
All
you.
right. All in favor of going into executive session, please say aye.
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 All right, give me a moment.